Welcome to the Me and Money podcast, where your hosts and certified financial planners, Matt Fizell and Elliott Appel, share their thoughts on hot topics, important concepts, and real-life stories in personal finance. Hear from Matt and Elliott as they share lessons learned in their own financial journeys and those they've witnessed throughout their careers while helping clients. Have a question you'd like to hear discussed on a future episode of the podcast? You can reach out to Matt or Elliott or drop your question at the link listed in the show notes. Before we get to the episode, we'd like to remind you that while both Matt and Elliott are financial planners, they are not your financial planner, and this podcast is only intended for educational purposes. For full disclosures, please be sure to listen to the end of the episode or check out the show notes on your favorite podcast platform. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Matt Fizell and Elliott Appel.
Welcome back to another episode of the Me and Money podcast. Last time we talked about 530A accounts, so we're going to roll the number back, I guess, 1A and talk about 529 plans today. In our last episode, Elliott and I started to have a bit of a debate, and we decided we might as well just dedicate a whole episode to it. So we're going to take different sides of the coin here, and maybe you'll vibe with one of us more than the other. So, Elliott, since you proposed this debate, we'll let you start it.
Sounds good. I like this one, Matt, because I feel like you and I see eye to eye on most things, at least somewhat. And this one is, I'd say, more different than a lot of planning topics. And that just goes to show sometimes you have different approaches and different biases. Doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's just how we think about things. And I think my position with this is I don't necessarily want, in most cases, for most families, to significantly overfund a 529 plan, but I'll also often target, call it 50 to 75% of school in a 529 plan, with the remainder either coming from cash flow or brokerage account, something like that, some sort of flexibility. So if your kid does get scholarships, goes to a less expensive school, something like that, you don't have too much in the 529 plan that's harder to get out. Some families who have significant resources, I will plan on overfunding this. We'll put a boatload in, maybe we'll super fund and do 5 years worth of the gift tax exclusion amount. So get, $80,000, $90,000 into that in a single year and just let that grow, maybe even from a young age, maybe from birth, with the idea that, at least from my perspective, a 529 plan has quite a bit of flexibility. So you can, big thing is paying for qualified educational expenses, that's tax-free. So you put in $100,000, that grows to $500,000. $500,000 can be used for education, which is great. Let's say your kid decides not to go to college or goes to a cheaper school and you don't need the full amount. You can always change it. So if you have another kid and that kid goes on to get a master's or something like that, medical school, for example, you can pay for it that way. If your kids end up having kids, you can make this a multi-generational thing. Or if you want to switch a family member, there's certain qualifying family members where you can switch this without any tax consequences. And then let's say that you really none of that works out and you don't do the Roth conversion piece to the limit. Like you exhaust all those options, which I've never actually seen that in a family. But if you are that family and you've seen that, I'd love to hear that scenario and what happened. But let's say that all doesn't work out. You can still take it out. There's a 10% penalty on the earnings piece. So that 100,000 that grows to 500, it's only the 400 where you pay the 10% penalty in ordinary income. So it's really not that, it's taking it out of a retirement account essentially before 59 and a half in that situation. And you got $400,000 worth of tax deferred growth in that situation versus a brokerage account. It's not the end of the world, right? If you really exhausted that and you can't pay for college, you can't switch the beneficiary, you can't find something. I was joking with Matt, you can find a qualifying school and you can change the beneficiary to yourself. I might go back to cooking school and enjoy that if I had too much in a 529 plan, just for fun. Not for a degree. We're not making this we're going to our next career, but just as a fun thing for a school that qualifies. I don't know. For me, there's just a ton of flexibility with that. And I think people get scared of locking the money up.
Yeah. I don't disagree with much of what you said, but if there was one word I was going to pick on in your whole debate, it's if.
Okay.
There's a lot of ifs in there, right? If the kid goes to college, if the kid has kids, if they then go to college. I mean, when you really think about that, right? Gen 1 contribution to Gen 3 going to school, that could be 36 years, right? Like, and if that thing's super funded, like, I still think it's going to be way too much money. In fact, I've seen some of those where there's like, a few 529s with like a couple $100,000 each. And by the time their grandkids are 18 and going to college, it's going to be like just an obscenely large, almost disgusting amount of money.
I'm so excited about that. You've essentially paid for education for the end of time for your family lineage.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, it's probably too much. Like, I'm not anti 529. However, the tax deduction is great. But again, I think, like, unfortunately, the families that need to save for college the most, like, how much of a tax benefit are you really getting? Like, is that going to help with other things that you may need to do?
Oh, for sure.
Right. Like, I don't think the account itself is bad. I just think it's like overutilized by people who may not necessarily like need it. And that's kind of where I was going with the if word in your statement, because there are a lot of edge cases, like, and a lot of really good uses for a 529, but it's almost gotten to the point, like, in my opinion, and I know we have some differing opinion on maybe the pervasiveness of Roth conversion culture.
Sure.
But I think it's almost like overprescribed. And I don't think a lot of people do it with intention. I think a lot of people do it because they think it's the only way to support or save for their child's future. They think of it as the automatically best way to do that. And what's really interesting too is a lot of the families that I've talked to, they have very differing opinions on how they want to fund, like, their child's education. A lot of them are kind of that first generation wealth, and they either had to pay for some of it themselves and their parents helped with some of it. And for them specifically, like, they do have a value of, oh, I think it's actually good that the kid pays for some of it themselves. Now, sure, could you make an arrangement and make it happen a little bit more tax efficiently through a 529? Absolutely. Like, maybe the kid reimburses the parents down the road or something like that. But that's kind of where I go with that. And I think too, I've seen a lot of parents who want to support their kid in a way that would mean more to them. And by that, I mean, like, a lot of our generation has struggled buying a house, and they think it's going to be really hard for their kid to buy a house. So again, I'm not poo-pooing entirely on the 529, but I think there's just there is flexibility, and I know you can pass it on, like, indefinitely, and you can go to cooking class. I don't want to go back to school ever. Like, formal education is my personal version of hell. Like, I never, ever want to go back to formal education. But yeah, I think a lot of that can be accomplished with a brokerage account. And if you do save it in a brokerage account and you want to get that tax deduction at the end, well, just make a giant lump sum. Like, once you know this kid is trending towards college and is actually going to be able to use the darn thing. Now, that's where, again, like, some of the changes, and I've certainly pulled my stance back on that quite a bit since the 529 got revamped with the Roth conversion and expanded use of qualified uses for it. But I think they used to be a lot more rigid and a lot more of a, like, is your kid going to go to school, like, actually, and use all of that money? I think that used to be a very different conversation versus now you do kind of have some safety valves or alternative routes to unwind that money, other than perpetually changing the beneficiary and sending Elliott to cooking class 30 years down the road.
Matt, I want to take this two ways, and I'm not sure which way to start first. I want to circle back to the idea of parents wanting to support their kids in different ways and having their kid pay for some college. I want to talk about that because I think that's an important piece. But before we go there, let's talk about how you would structure this then, if not the 529 plan. Like, what are the cases where you'd recommend people would not use a 529, and what would be the alternative?
Yeah, so I'm going to not make advice here, but
sure,
I'm just going to explain
all
my thought
educational
process. Yeah. So, I mean, number one, like, what do the parents want to fund, right? If they want to fund Harvard, very different situation than if they want to fund UW-Madison, right?
Okay.
Like, one is substantially more than the other. You could probably benefit from larger contributions to a 529 plan earlier in their life if that's what you truly want to provide. If not, right, if you don't live in a state with income tax, and I did work in Dallas for a while, I know you have this in Washington State as well, but there's not really like that much of a difference, in my opinion, of a 529 versus maybe an UGMA account in those earlier years, because there's not going to be $2,700 of ordinary income or gains kicking off of that account. And you're basically going to have tax deferred growth in the truest sense of the word, right? Not actually, because you're using up some of the kiddie tax, but functionally, they're really not going to be that different if you're not getting a state income tax deduction. So that's where I would start. And then, as you start to understand, like, who your child is, they start to develop personality, actually get into school, see what direction they're going in life. I think that's where we'd start to make a more actual decision as to like which of these two accounts should we be funding more of. Or if you don't want to give outright control of those dollars to your kid at 18, because there are some questions there, should you just save it in your own brokerage account instead and then make that decision later on down the road? So that's where I kind of see like the big decision point, probably around like 7 or 8. And then you still have plenty of time to make a bigger contribution. Ideally, you'd have been saving those dollars in your own brokerage account, like anyways, and just letting those compound and having the bigger lump sum so you haven't missed out on that compounding growth.
Okay.
All right. So where do you want to head from there? I mean, I threw a lot at you, and I hope that all stuck with listeners, but I really view it as like you can accomplish essentially the same thing. It's just, it may have some small tax impacts if your state allows for a deduction, but is it really that much of an optimization? And is it worth locking those dollars in the 529?
And I actually lived this scenario. So I continually saved in a brokerage account personally for a family member of mine who is going to college in the next few years. And the growth, when I calculated the taxable consequences of this, it was going to be a few $1,000s difference. And we're not talking huge sums of money here, but like not enough to pay for a year of school. But it was the difference between a 529 plan and that brokerage account was going to be a few $1,000s less for them to pay for college. And that was only on a smaller scale. So I think that that's something to consider depending on how much flexibility you want. And that gets at the heart of what you're saying, Matt, is what's the flexibility here and what's its worth to you in terms of tax consequences?
All right. So a few $1,000s over a few years or a few $1,000s over 20 years?
So that's sort of 1 year because it's being used for college.
Oh, okay. Like today?
Soon.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. So there's really no way to get out of that.
So I really wouldn't argue against that, though, because at that point when the contribution was made, you probably knew they were headed towards college, right?
Started it when they were young.
Oh, okay.
Super young.
Well, that was my question, though, like a few $1,000s. So it would be a few $1,000s different over from when you made the contribution to when they're taking it. Is that
the tax consequences?
Right. So over 20 years?
Call 15? It 16. Yeah, 15, okay. 16.
So again, we're going to go back. I know you think I don't like to spend money here, but it's like, to me, and again, my job isn't to tell someone what to do, right? It's to highlight the pros and cons, understand the situation, and help them make an informed decision, right? Advice, right? Not do in most cases. But that's something where, like, to me, the pure flexibility of a brokerage account is probably worth a couple $100s a year.
Okay.
Like, right? I mean, because if it's not used for the college, you're still going to pay, I know, only on the earnings, right? But you're still going to pay some taxes. And then my $200, $300 a year of premium for flexibility is not quite as much compared to the 529.
Okay. Interesting. I want to pivot, and I want to go back to the parents. And you obviously work, I think, with more parents than I do personally. I probably work with more grandparents. I'm curious about the parents' perspective, and I may alienate your entire audience with these questions and whatnot. But like, what are parents' expectations in terms of kids paying for college these days? Because I think it's a very different story, right? I pull up University of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin resident. We're talking, if we tuition and fees, required materials, housing and meals, transportation, like all those things, we're talking about over $30,000 a year. So if we multiply that by 4, call it 120,000. Like, I don't know how to not swear here, but I'm going to try my best. How does a kid pay for even a portion of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if expectation is the right word. I think it's more of an attitude towards it, right? Like, I don't know that any parent would come out and say, like, if you're going to college, you're paying for it all. Like, I don't think any of my clients would say that. I really don't think I've ever met a parent who would say that. Especially because, like, in that type of a situation, like, if you really are financially that strapped where the child would be expected to pay for it all, right? It's kind of in the expected family contribution, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're probably going to be getting grants, scholarships, like some financial aid package that's going to help lower that hurdle. So you're not going to pay anywhere near sticker price for that. But I do think a lot of what I've heard, and it's really fascinating, like probably the best conversation I've had around this was with the former pastor of my church.
Uh-huh.
And he has 5 kids. Like, you want to talk about
$1,000,000, right?
You want to talk about an explicit episode here. Wow. But, his question was like, what should I be saving for college? And I think that's like such an interesting answer. And my question back to him was, well, what do you think feels right?
Yeah. It's a values conversation for sure.
Right. It's a values conversation. So I think those of you listening to it, like, what would it mean to you, right, for you to pay for X amount of their college, 1/3, 2/3, all of it, right? If one of those sparks more of a values feeling in you, like maybe that's where you should be guided, right? And where we were going in this conversation with my pastor is I think a lot of people have kind of latched onto the social norm that college should be entirely paid for. Like, that is the right thing to do as a parent, or you're a bad parent if you're not paying for your kid's education. And I think it's kind of interesting how a lot of my clients are really, truly like first generational wealth, but they don't have that desire to pay for their child's entire college because they felt that there was some value in having to have some skin in the game. And so that's what the answer was for them. And I think when, we think about 529 plans and how that all shakes out with that value and that approach to it, like, I don't know that maxing out, to get the deduction every year is the right answer. And I think the second question would be, you as a parent, like, how are you doing financially?
Oh yeah, because 100%. You got to take care of yourself first. Yeah.
Like, do not mortgage your retirement for your kids' college education. And, I think we can both speak uniquely to this. Like, I mean, I have to do some caregiving for my dad, and you certainly had to do some for yours. Like, the last thing your kid wants to do is take care of you financially, or like take care of you in that capacity when you're aging. So like, it's not going to feel great to them when they have to pay for college or take out loans, but I can almost guarantee that they'll thank you for taking care of yourself and not being that burden to them down the road. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a messy conversation. And there's a million different ways it could go, but that's why I'm not like all in on 529. I do think now that there's the ability to convert it to the Roth, and especially if you have multiple kids, where if you have 3 kids and none of them went to college, but you saved up all the amount for the first one to go, and that thing's compounding, and you can, work that out to get some Roth to each of them. Like, what a powerful tool, but edge case.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Did that answer your question? Like, how would you, I know you don't work with younger families typically, but like, how would you approach something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to you have to take care of yourself, figure that out. I mean, the standard rule is you can't take loans for retirement. You can for college, and you can always choose, like if your retirement's looking better than normal later on, you can always choose to pay off those loans or pay for more college or do something like that. So that's always the priority. I'm always curious, like, how much skin in the game do parents want? And I don't have a perfect answer, right? I think some skin in the game is helpful for that, but is it 80%? Is it 100%? Like, I don't know where the percentage lies, or if we're talking about dollar terms, because obviously a $30,000 school is very different than a $100,000 school when you factor everything in. So it's just one of those things where I think it comes back to the values. I think for families who have the resources to fund it, it's an interesting choice for me when they don't fund it because of the flexibility. And, I know you picked on the word if earlier, and I'll flip it back the other way, right? If you have multiple kids, you're a college educated family, and statistically, those kids tend to go to college as well because that's the expectation. Like, what are the odds that all of them don't go to college? Like, that's where my mind goes, right? Knowing the statistics of that all happening, none of them go to college. Okay, you built up a large 529 plan, but I would say that's a very small minority. And usually when we're making planning decisions, we're planning on most likely outcomes or being conservative with it. So that's where I lead on. I really love the 529 plan. And particularly, and I'm talking for families where like baby was just born or born in the last 5 years or something like that. I'm not talking for people that are in high school. It's not that you're too late for planning. There's still planning to be done. But the real power is when you can get it shortly after birth, right? And you actually get 18 years of compounding, particularly in those early contributions. That's where I get super excited, because then we actually get some benefit of the tax-free growth, as opposed to, maybe when your child's 12 or 14, the brokerage account isn't terrible because the growth on that over a few years isn't like going to make or break. It's not like we're getting maybe $50,000 or $60,000 of tax-free money.
But if you wanted to use that brokerage account for something else, you can, and you can't with the 529. Like,
you can with the 10% penalty on the earnings.
I know, but
and I think that goes back to not fully funding it, right? Maybe 50 to 75% as a target, and that extra 25 to 50% is the other flexibility if they don't do that or want to start a business or do something like that.
Yeah, I will say too, like a lot of the tax deduction benefits, you can still get those at the end. Like, here in Wisconsin, like if you were to make a, $40,000, Elliott's rolling his eyes for this.
It's just not a huge, like, coming from a state with no income tax, when you start reading about the income tax deductions and the cap on that, it's like peanuts compared to the contribution.
But you can carry forward that deduction in some states. So, I mean, a $40,000, one-time contribution here in Wisconsin, if you spread that out over 10 years and you can take almost 10 years, max deduction for 10 years, it's going to be a few $1,000s, and that's, now we're getting right back to where we were, where you were talking about saving, a few $1,000s over 18 years. Well, I guess where I'm going with this is I think it can work out about the same, like other than the compounded growth. But
other than the benefit of the 529 plan.
Well, absolutely. But I think the further, I think that's the funniest thing about what we do, right? Like, there's always another lever. Like,
yeah,
the more you benefit from the compounding growth, the more likely you are that the kid, like, you're just not as far along in understanding that kid's developmental path. Like, you don't know at that point, the least about if they're going to go to school or not. Like, the risk is the highest there, right? Yeah. Your tax risk is also the highest there. So that's the game we play. But I would agree with you.
Have a good backup kid then.
And then there's the other wrench. Like, what if college, like, pricing the way it is isn't sustainable, and you end up with even more money than you thought?
I don't think if it's sustainable. I don't think it is sustainable. But I don't know how that changes. But yes, that is also a risk, and that's again why I go back to, let's not fully fund it at 100% of what we want to do.
What if we just give free secondary education someday? Then what?
I'm sure the political
it won't
lobbying,
happen.
Yeah, I'm sure the political lobbying and the wealthy people who have 529 plans will have some sort of carve out for these funds to be used well.
Really? You don't just think they'd, RMD it and say, yeah, you got to pay the taxes now? Like, I don't care. And you're going to be in a single filing tax bracket because your spouse died, and you're going to get Medicare surcharge tax. Man, I like your version of the government better than mine.
Too many politicians with too much money in these accounts that that's not going to happen. But
yeah,
that's my speculation.
If that was the case, they would have made the Roth like way higher.
Well, there's still time. It's new.
I just want to thank all of our listeners, who listened to this episode and last episode, because, Elliott didn't like the idea of getting additional provisions on the Trump account, but, the 529 is getting all the glory here. So.
No, I think that's the part of the Trump account I did agree with you on is
okay.
That was the part that I hadn't been thinking about, that I thought was actually a really good, like, something I had not considered. I sort of just counted it out, and then you brought that up, and I was like, well, that's interesting. I don't know if it changed my outcome, but it changes my perspective on the account for the future.
Yeah, it doesn't change anything for now, but this was good. I like debates. I think we agree more or less. It's just like we're looking at different scenarios. And I think a lot of that key. I think a lot of that comes from just our lived experience, like our path to where we are. And I think that's really important. Like, and that's why there really isn't a right or wrong answer with what we do. Like, everyone's going to have a different feeling on things, and that's what makes our job fun and interesting and different every day. So appreciate the debate.
Likewise, Matt. Thank you.
And one last thing, for the love of God, people, like, learn how to disagree with people well. Like, you can have great conversations if you just learn to disagree well with people. So I appreciate you, Elliott.
Same, Matt.
All right. See you next time.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Me and Money podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Have a question you'd like to suggest for a future episode? Drop Matt or Elliott a question at their email, or use the linked form in the show notes. Like what you heard? It would be a tremendous help to us in our mission of having real conversations about personal finance by leaving us a review on your favorite podcast app. A few words can go a long way in connecting those looking for content like ours on their app of choice. You can also support the show by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thanks again for listening, and be on the lookout for future episodes soon.
The Me and Money podcast is hosted and produced by Harmony Outsourcing Services LLC. Matt Fizell is an investment advisor representative of Harmony Wealth LLC. Elliott Appel is an investment advisor representative of Kindness Financial Planning LLC. However, the views and opinions expressed by Matt and Elliott in this podcast are not intended as individualized investment advice on behalf of Harmony or Kindness, or as tax, accounting, or legal advice. Although we gather information from sources that we deem to be reliable, we cannot guarantee the accuracy, timeliness, or completeness of any information prepared by any unaffiliated third party. When specific investments or types of investments are mentioned, such mention is not intended to be a recommendation or endorsement to buy or sell the specific investment. Harmony is a registered investment advisor authorized to do business in the states of Wisconsin and Texas and other jurisdictions where exempted. Kindness is a registered investment advisor authorized to do business in Wisconsin and Washington and in other jurisdictions where exempted. Registration as a registered investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. This website contains links to the Harmony and Kindness websites that provide general information about the advisory services offered by Harmony and Kindness. These links are provided as a convenience only. Harmony and Kindness can only provide individualized services after you sign an agreement and receive required disclosures. Users of this website may, but are not required to, engage the services of Harmony or Kindness for advisory services. Please remember that all investments involve varying degrees of risk, and the future performance of any specific investment or investment strategy is not guaranteed to be profitable or equal to any historical performances. As a final note, we'd encourage you to reach out to your financial professionals before implementing any of the strategies or concepts discussed in this podcast. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.